October 23rd, 2019 Board of County Commissioners meeting for Deschutes County. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item on the agenda is citizen input. Haven't got any today, it doesn't look like. I was going to go on then to the consent agenda. Any items for removal or any comments? And Commissioner DeBone is on schedule to be here. He's running a little bit late, but we've got quite a few things, so we thought we could probably start and get through some of this before you said he'd be here 5 minutes late, and that should be in a couple minutes.
I move we approve the consent agenda for today, October 23rd, 2019.
Okay, and I'll second that. Any further comments? I did notice we are doing the letter supporting the restoration of the community dispute resolution funding, which I think we're all glad to see. I still think it's kind of interesting where the cuts were made in the last session, and it'd be interesting to know more about that. But anyway, so Commissioner Adair?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So if you're here for that, those are done. Our first item on the action agenda is Deschutes Basin Habitat Conservation Plan briefing with Peter Gutowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Adair, for the record, Peter Gutowski, Deschutes County's planning manager. What I thought I would do is, in light of the two public meetings that occurred last week in Bend and Prineville, to provide input and to offer opportunities for testimony on the draft habitat conservation plan and the corresponding environmental impact statement, would be to, I think the board is aware of this, but members who may be in the audience or listening at home, provide a brief overview, kind of what's the basis for initiating a habitat conservation plan, why it applies to the 8 irrigation districts in the city of Prineville, and then recap the draft HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan, and some of the takeaways that I found in terms of the environmental impact statement.
Okay, that sounds great. And we appreciate you going to the meetings and also the brief. Besides what was in our package, you gave us a nice memo last week with the attachments. So putting it all together is pretty, useful. So, yeah, why don't you just take it, and then we'll probably ask questions as we go. I think my goal, and we can all speak to it. Welcome. We just thought we'd start with the consent agenda, so hopefully you didn't have any problems with that, the minutes or anything. I think understanding where we are, and we had wanted to participate, so maybe outlining where we might participate as commissioners and how to do that. So.
Great. Okay, so for the basis for a habitat conservation plan, as I conceptualize it, is having an understanding of the species that are threatened or endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act, and those that could be listed as threatened or endangered over a period of, say, several decades. So I'm going to give you a Deschutes County lens to start off with. So in Deschutes County, the Oregon spotted frog, which is located on the upper Deschutes and the Little Deschutes River, and it's up in Wickiup and Crane Prairie. It also goes up to Crescent Lake, which is in Klamath County. So the Oregon spotted frog is threatened. And there are also two fisheries that are threatened as well. One is bull trout, and the other is steelhead. And steelhead has under the Endangered Species Act, has a experimental designation. It's called a 10J designation. And I know you recently had an update with the Pelton Round Butte project.
Monday.
But when that project was kind of fulfilled, there was a huge emphasis to reintroduce steelhead. And it's an experimental status, so it's not technically protected under the Endangered Species Act today. It will be in 2025. Now
that's because they're
exactly
reintroducing it. So
exactly.
At the time, it isn't a
kind of a
natural or resident species. If it's reintroduced, then it becomes, or that it must be a protected species, or in other rivers, I know.
Correct.
That goes in a
Correct.
lot of
Steelhead
rivers.
is likely in the Willamette Valley and the Coast Range, but because of the barriers at the Pelton Route Butte complex, it's been reintroduced. And that was a huge settlement with Portland General Electric and the tribes. So until 2025, it has an experimental designation. So it's not subject to a take under Section 9, a take under Section 9. It really emphasizes the importance of not injuring or harming listed species that are under Threatened and Endangered Species Act. So steelhead has an experimental designation, and so if your operations or activities injured or harm steelhead, you would not be subject to a third-party lawsuit or to litigation by the agency that oversees steelhead, which would be the the NOAA Marine Fisheries Service, because steelhead is anadromous. But the point I wanted to make here is in Deschutes County, we only have the Oregon spotted frog that's in our geography. I don't know if you know this, but near the Deschutes-Jefferson County line, there is a natural barrier. It's called Big Falls. It's a spectacular waterfall that prevents upward migration for fisheries. Now, bull trout and steelhead are in the Weiches, but as I understand it, they're only in the lower Weiches. So Weiches, the confluence of Weiches into the middle Deschutes is in Jefferson County, and it takes about, as the crow flies, it's about 6 miles upstream until you get to Deschutes. So right now, bull trout, to my knowledge, is not entering the Deschutes County. And steelhead is, as I understand it, is still right around, if you've ever done that hike around Alder Springs, it's really near the confluence of Weiches and the middle Deschutes. Now, the Deschutes Basin Land Trust, Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, they are reintroducing steelhead fry in places like Camp Polk Meadow. So it is entirely possible into the next decade that steelhead will be in Deschutes County. But right now, steelhead is a 10J designation, which means it's experimental. And so my point of telling you this is just to emphasize, for Deschutes County right now, as of today, we just have Oregon spotted frog. Steelhead, bull trout, they go up the Crooked River. There's no impenetrable natural barrier.
I have a question, Peter.
Sure.
What is the natural predator of the Oregon spotted frog?
Well, this is reintroduced, but there is it's going to escape me. It's a giant frog that was reintroduced actually for eating in the 30s and 40s, and
I heard it was the bullfrog.
I think it is. It might be the bullfrog. It is.
What I heard. I heard the bullfrog was killing the spotted frog.
Yes, bullfrog does eat the frog. Thank you for, I couldn't think of the first name. As I understand it, bullfrog have trouble coexisting in our climate, at least today, because it gets so cold. But they are, in other parts of the state, they have contributed to the decline, if not the extirpation, of the spotted frog in other areas in Washington and so forth. So, yeah,
So,
go ahead.
and that reminds me, a couple years ago, this was introduced, just the beginning of this process, coming around the Habitat Conservation Plan. But the spotted frog did have a habitat up and down the coast in the west. So
Yep.
this is a minimal set of habitat now
Yep.
at this location. But it's a shame because it's getting more acute in our backyard because of the loss of habitat around the west.
Correct.
And
And
hopefully there's a chapter on that, or at least a couple
well,
of pages in the
and in
Habitat
some
Conservation
respects,
Plan.
it's a great point, Commissioner DeBonne, that a multitude of factors contributed to the Oregon spotted frog remaining in the Upper Deschutes Basin. And that has a combination to do with land use patterns and climate, and I think to some degree, your predecessors on the board having regulations that protect riparian habitat. It's been able to survive, whereas in other places that, for a multitude of other reasons, it was extinguished. And so you could argue in some respects that we're not getting penalized, but it's like, here's their refuge, and now, because it's on the endangered species list, and it's federally protected, our region has to come together and figure out how to protect this species, whereas, you know, in other places, before there was the awareness or the understanding or environmental regulations, it was removed from its habitat and no longer exists there.
But, so what you're saying is, the conclusion is that this is one of the few areas that still have it, so therefore it's more acute, I think is what you said, that something be done here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's protected under the, I mean, I don't know enough about its biology and its range, but, you know, if you can imagine if there was the Federal Endangered Species Act, you know, in the 40s, 50s, and maybe early 60s, it could have kept that species intact in areas where it was seeing incredible conflicts. So in our case, it's listed. It was listed earlier this decade, and this is a nice transition in terms of when you have these listed species. Of course, we talked about bull trout and steelhead, and there's two fisheries that are potentially that may be listed on the Federal Endangered Species Act, and they are sockeye and Chinook. Now, again, those two fisheries are not coming up to the Deschutes because of big falls, and I don't believe they used Wyches Creek historically. They went up the Crooked. So a habitat conservation plan in this case is addressing the three listed species, Oregon spotted frog, bull trout, and steelhead, and is also being proactive, looking at these two other fisheries that could be listed, so it's as holistic as possible. And so stepping back, we have these listed species, two potentially that could be listed, and then there's those entities whose activities could lead to a take, could harm or injure these species. And of course, it is related to water withdrawals or storage or diversions. And so the 8 irrigation districts, and I can list them if you'd like, they're in them, I cite them on page 1 of the memorandum in your packet, but 8 irrigation districts within the Deschutes Basin Board of Control and the city of Prineville, the irrigations store, release, divert, and return irrigation water. And the city of Prineville has groundwater withdrawals, effluent discharges, and surface water diversions. And all of those activities, when you step back, could lead to a take, could lead to injuring or harming these listed species.
So I want to ask you, so take is technically, that's how you define it as say that again?
So a take under Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act is defined, and I think I have it in your third footnote there. I'll just read it for you. Activities that harm or otherwise take protected, and I put listed species, are prohibited under Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act. And so what the irrigation districts, these 8 irrigation districts did with the city of Prineville is the spotted frog, and I think to a certain extent, steelhead and bull trout compelled them to want to obtain what's called an incidental take permit. And when an incidental take permit is allowed under the Endangered Species Act under Section 10 of that law, and it requires a habitat conservation plan. And so it's like if you know your activities, in this case as it pertains to fisheries and an amphibian, a spotted frog, you can develop a habitat conservation plan that allows you to still undertake those activities subject to certain best management practices. And so once, if you're successful with a habitat conservation plan, and in this case, I'm going to transition now to what the irrigation districts in the city of Prineville, we'll call them the applicants, what they ultimately did is they submitted a habitat conservation plan to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA Marine Fisheries Service in late August because they want that incidental take permit. If it's approved, it will allow them to continue their operations subject to approved mitigation measures. And then if they injure or harm either of those species, they're insulated from a third-party lawsuit or any corrective actions that the federal agencies are charged to execute. So it's a huge, huge tool. And in this case, it wasn't something that the federal agencies initiated. It was what the applicants wanted, because they want that certainty. They don't want to be subject to third-party lawsuits or any kind of punitive actions that these two agencies are, they're created to essentially address and try to protect these types of listed species.
And really, the origin of all this was the original lawsuit against the irrigators by a couple of
Correct.
environmental groups.
Correct.
Saying that what they were doing was harming this species.
Correct.
So
Right.
it led to a settlement, right? That there'd be like a period of time when they could work on an HCP and environmental impact statement and try to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I really appreciate, Chair Henderson, you bringing up that point. As I understand it, the irrigation districts in the city of Prineville in around 2009 were considering this type of plan. And you're right, there was threatened litigation, I think more on the fisheries that I was describing. And it really elevated the need for the irrigation districts in the city of Prineville to step back and really consider a habitat conservation plan. And then you had the Oregon spotted frog, which I think if there was any contemplation about whether or not there was the utility to undertake this type of effort, it was validated. And I know for the last, I'm guessing 18 to 24 months, the irrigation districts in the city of Prineville, the applicants, have been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on early concepts of the habitat conservation plan. And I note in the memorandum that the board respectfully requested to be a cooperating agency as a government, which is allowed under federal law. And ultimately that was executed in March for us to have, for you to direct staff to participate in these meetings and to review some of the early versions of the draft environmental impact statement. But that coordination effort with the tribes, with state agencies, with federal agencies was occurring in 2018. So there's been, I think, a proactive relationship, if you could call that, or a formal relationship with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the applicants to vet this early preliminary drafts of the habitat conservation plan so each side could understand their respective issues. Irrigation districts have operations, and the city of Prineville have operations that they are obligated to execute under their jurisdictions, and meanwhile, these federal agencies have responsibilities to protect and conserve these species. So, on August, so I'm transitioning now kind of to what's taken place. So on August 30th, the applicants formally submitted the habitat conservation plan to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And that then led to a draft environmental impact statement that evaluated the habitat conservation plan, several alternatives, the mitigation measures that were being proposed, the ability for the applicants to economically execute their mitigation measures, because that's a factor. One cannot impose unreasonable or unrealistic obligations on what we'll call the applicants again. And so when they formally initiated that plan, it set off the public comment period. They had to provide notice in their version in the Federal Register, and it set up a 45-day public comment period, which ends on November 18th. And so one of the questions before the board is, are you interested in providing public comments, which you certainly have the ability to do.
Do you have a hard copy of the Habitat Conservation Plan and the EIS?
I do not have a hard copy of the HCP. We can certainly make it available. It's online. It's like 800 pages.
So they didn't publish any, it's just, everybody's supposed to get it offline.
Correct. What I did under, with your direction, under our expertise, is I looked at and examined the land use implications, the socioeconomic and land use implications of the draft habit conservation plan and the other alternatives as discussed in the environmental impact statement. And so transitioning, if I can, to the conservation measures that are being contemplated, and you've seen this in several emails, and it's in the memo on page 2. You can see under table 1, basically one of the proposed conservation measures are mainly focused on providing specific flows by specific timelines in key reaches of the upper Deschutes, basin. So we're talking about specific flow regimes for the upper Deschutes, Little Deschutes, Crescent Creek, which is again in Klamath County, Wychus, and the Crooked River system.
And they've been kind of experimenting with that already. I mean, when the
Right.
basin study work group was going on, there was a lot of discussion of that they were already implementing it, and that was why there'd been reduction of
Correct.
farming, amount of land farmed in Jefferson County, et cetera, I think, over the last couple of years.
That's right. And so the table that you have before you, there's basically 4 alternatives. There's a no alternative, then there's the draft habitat conservation plan, and then there's 2 other alternatives that are that have more of a conservation emphasis.
So the no action alternative mentions 100 CFS. Isn't that up from 20 or 40?
Yes.
I mean, so that's
It is an improvement.
that's a commitment already.
That's right. And that, as I understand it, it kind of correlates with what they're doing now in terms of piping canals, or in terms of piping irrigation canals, and then that transmission loss because of the porous nature of lava rock and bedrock or basalt. That basically is required to be in stream, so it does produce more in-stream flow. And I think it's largely reflected to that 100 CFS system. In the paper, in the bulletin, I thought had a nice piece over the weekend summarizing the habitat conservation plan. They acknowledged that there's concerns by a conservation organization, Central Oregon Land Watch, Todd Heisler is quoted, really emphasizing more of the conservation alternatives, more water and sooner over this proposed 30-year timeline. So the Habitat Conservation Plan, as proposed today, has a 30-year lifespan. I also did a search, and I know that Oregon Water Watch also is taking the stance that there should be, really they're pushing, they didn't say it, but I'm presuming either alternative 3 or alternative 4. Again, more water in stream earlier in the 30-year horizon.
That would be something that maybe as commissioners or as a board, we could
Yep.
have an opinion about with regard to the impacts on people in our counties,
Correct.
in our county, and the
Well, you have
other
to look
life
at,
issues.
Actually, the big impact goes to Jefferson County because the North Unit has they're the bottom of the
Yeah.
list, and they have all that agricultural land up there. So those are the ones that it's going to have to go.
But as an example, they get the negative impacts of possibly an accelerated deal, but the costs may be borne by our irrigation companies too, because it would probably mean more accelerated piping, et cetera, to get there. So it interplays with our residents, I think, also. So you're right about their water's the newest or youngest, so. Yeah, but I mean, that issue would be something we could comment about, is the timeline and what we would think would be good for Deschutes County residents. I mean, we can talk about Jefferson County residents also. I mean, that's, as the farming community, so, okay.
Commissioner Dare's point is well taken. North Unit has junior water rights,
Yes.
and yet based on agricultural census and the economies that we all are aware of. Jefferson, they're the most vulnerable with any of these measures. Their economy is far more dependent on agriculture than Deschutes counties. And when I looked at, just to give you a Deschutes County lens, and I'm not at all trying to dismiss the impacts that this could have on Deschutes County farmers or patrons, but when you look at the agricultural economics section of the environmental impact statement and the associated economic environmental justice aspect, it really shifts to Jefferson County. Our economy, 1% of our county is really, or 1 to 2% is devoted to agriculture. In Jefferson County, it's much more significant.
But I'll give you an example of something that would be negative impact. So because there's been articles on this too, is about the deer population. And they're making out, well, it's all because of too many people. Well, you start eliminating all these canals and all the little ones all throughout it, we're taking away an entire man-made water system, and there's less and less sources of water. And the one thing deer need and stay by is water. So, it does have multiple impacts because it's kind of like you can't have both. So we're protecting the frog, but we might be impacting and it's not just deer, it's every land living animal is using these canals that are spread. We built a artificial river system throughout our county and into Jefferson County over the last 100 years. And if we take it all away, we're gonna go back to the desert that was here. So
The other thing to recognize, and I think the environmental impact statement does a good job, is, so we're talking about a 30-year window, right? And we're gonna have periods where we may have droughts, or we may or have drier years and wetter years. And I just want to read, if I can, this effect on economic opportunity. This is the preferred alternative, and I would say alternatives 3 and 4, which are more conservation oriented, they don't create significant adverse effects, and that's a term that the environmental impact statement references. But there are still effects. And so I'm just going to read this. In dry years, agricultural production and associated economic contribution would decline in all counties, with Jefferson County potentially experiencing the greatest reduction in forage, grain-related employment and income. Here's the sentence that really distinguishes Deschutes County from the other 2 counties in our region. Across all water year types, total jobs and income supported by grain forage production are expected to decrease by 1 to 2% in Crook and Deschutes counties and by up to 14% in Jefferson County. Likewise, when you look at agricultural economics, it says this is dealing with total crop production under existing conditions. And I would say this has correlations under the preferred alternative as well. It says in Deschutes County, farm sector employment and income represent up to approximately 2% of the county economy, compared to 12% for Crook County and 13% for Jefferson County. Now,
are you saying that?
That's under existing conditions today.
But the reduction you said was 12%. Is that per year or over the lifespan of the conservation measures?
That's a good question. I believe it would be the impact that this would have economically on the county. So I think that's over the course of the 30-year.
So the issue would be, do you want to implement that in 5 or 10 years, or do you want to do it in 30?
Now, let me this is somewhat redundant, but again, what I was reading you first was from socioeconomic and environmental justice, and then this is coming from the agricultural economics. This is under the preferred alternative. In dry water years, economic contribution decline in all counties, with Jefferson County potentially experiencing the greatest reduction in forage grain-related employment and income. In median water years, Crook and Deschutes counties are expected to experience minor impacts, less than 1%, while Jefferson County may experience a decline of up to 11% relative to the jobs and income supported by grain and forage production. So I guess this language that is derived from those writers who write environmental impact statements, it goes back, I think, to Commissioner Adair's point, is Jefferson County will see the greatest impacts. As depending on our snowpack, depending on how conservation measures are implemented, economically, Jefferson County sees the largest impact. And a big part of that is they have junior water rights. It's not to, I think it's fair to underscore Chair Henderson's point, is it's still going to have impacts on the land and will have economic impacts for patrons. It's just, we all acknowledge that our economy is so different and unique than the other two counties in our region. So, to me, those are really the key points. And again, I read other sections dealing with recreation, dealing with the biology, but I get further away from land use, my expertise really diminishes. So I figured what I reported over the last, I'd say 6 to 7 weeks, was just to underscore, give the board an understanding of what it meant in the upland area, outside of our major riverine systems and irrigation diversions, only because we don't have jurisdiction. Water rights, of course, are regulated and monitored by the Oregon Water Resources Department.
Can you answer, I noticed it says all the thing is targeted for increasing the stream flows in the fall and winter. What's the timeline of that? Does fall start? When does fall start and when does winter end, so to speak?
That's a really good question. So the irrigation district, the irrigation diversion, or the irrigation season, it has ended. And I think it's going to be dependent. I mean, so it would be essentially anywhere from between October and April. April is when irrigation begins, and those with senior water rights can call their water. I can't say for certain. I can certainly get back to you, Commissioner Henderson, but I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on what kind of snowpack do we have, what kind of runoff are we getting, what are kind of the needs of, in this case, in the upper basin, of the spotted frog, how is the Little Deschutes faring into that contribution to the Deschutes. So I think it will be dependent on kind of our climatic cycles and, just the overall hydrology that's occurring with the Little Deschutes, Crescent Creek, and the Upper Deschutes. But it's technically going to, legitimately, it will
The
be
non-irrigations.
It's October to April.
And
Yeah,
it's-
the date they turn the flows up or down,
the
usually
interest-
is the middle of October and the middle of April, and
And-
they probably could change.
And in the
but-
past, they were simply put, they were kind of,
They were storing.
they were cutting off water to fill the reservoirs for the next year, basically.
Yep.
And then when they get full enough, then they'd open them back up, I assume.
There was a
so.
history of stock runs also
Yeah.
at different times of year where they'd kind of let it flow down the system in the middle of the winter or when the weather was correct.
And Craig Harrell is quoted in the Bulletin article. He's the district manager for Central Oregon Irrigation District, and his response to those that desire alternatives 3 and 4, which want more water and sooner. Mr. Harrell was quoted as, look, because North Unit has junior water rights, they need Central Oregon Irrigation District's senior rights. And so there needs to be kind of water exchanges. And as Craig was articulating, those savings, that exchange of water really, it comes down to implementing efficiency measures, both on the farm as well as with, there's huge resources that Senator Merkley has helped spearhead that's providing funding to pipe canals. And I know the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board is providing matching funding. So what I took away, is that they need those infrastructure projects and on-farm efficiency measures to take place. That's not gonna happen overnight, and that's why the conserved water that under the proposed action, under the Habitat Conservation Plan, is, taking place in the year 15, year 20, year 25. And, Mr. Harrell's point was that if you expect that water to be there sooner, it will bankrupt North Unit. We don't have, I think he's saying the irrigation districts don't have the means to provide that exchange until they get those efficiency measures in place. So that's, as you think about, as staff coordinates with you between now and November 18th, those are some of the issues that you may want to discuss. And I would respectfully request or suggest, not request, that you may want to get debriefed by Craig Harrell and,
Mike Britton.
thank you, I couldn't think of
Well,
his name
Craig
with
is now
North
actually
Unit.
the president of that group.
Of the Deschutes Basin Board of
Yes, he
Control,
just-
right.
He just was elected to that. But one of the things I think that the community needs to understand is a couple years ago when we got, those feet of snow that didn't melt forever, they actually fell not in the watershed area where we really needed them to impact it. So, I mean, that's a bit fascinating that, and it has to fall in the right area too to, help the whole
Be part of the
system.
watershed.
Yeah, to be part of it.
And the other thing I learned is that the water takes 2 years. So if you have a good snow year, 1 year, it doesn't really show up till the following year when it gets out of the ground. So that'll be interesting.
One of the
Lot to
statements may
discuss.
be to show support for agriculture, even in Jefferson County. This is, one of the concepts many years ago is the soils are so much better, that I figured out. Soils are so much better, elevation so much better. I mean, the value of getting water to Jefferson County and growing for a profit is much more than Deschutes. So I'm just saying a statement might be showing support for the
Well,
agricultural value.
It's interesting because, we all were part of the same county, Crook, Jefferson and Deschutes, and that when all these systems were developed, they were kind of connected that way. It wasn't
yeah.
considered as
Same
different
footprint,
counties.
yep. And the districts are older than the county. Yeah, these two new counties.
on the
basically,
ba-
relative to
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, the Basin Study Work Group, one of the issues came up was how good it would be if there could be another reservoir.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big capital expenditures that if we ever had a national infrastructure bill or spending, that if there was a reservoir that North Unit could fill up,
To take advantage of those what they call bulge flows, those
Yeah.
excessively high
They
winter
wouldn't have
flows.
as
You
much
could
demand.
store them and then.
solve a lot of the problems and the difficulty of that.
Yes, the 100-year flow that we
So-
didn't really get in 97, I guess.
Right. So that was, I'm happy I can go through and give you more takeaways, but my lens again was looking at it from a land use perspective. I wanted not to diminish the impacts that the Habitat Conservation Plan, even as proposed, will have on Jefferson County. But I felt it was important that, we're Deschutes County. I had an obligation to give you the kind of Deschutes County lens, but as all three of you have noted, that we are a region, and there are going to be implications to patrons in the 7 other irrigation districts, excluding North Unit. And, the region does function as one in many respects, certainly from an employment standpoint, as talked about in other projects dealing with employment land. So, I'm certainly offer, any coordination you would like, or working with the board to prepare comments based on what I've distilled, but likewise, to the extent you would like to be debriefed from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Bridget Moran, or starting with the Deschutes Basin Board of Control, certainly, staff can work with administration to schedule those debriefs. Again, the public comment period does close on November 18th. November tends to fly by pretty quickly with holidays and the AOC in Eugene, so it is steadily approaching.
That's the week.
Well, this is scheduled for longer, I'm going to leave now, but if you want to talk about that, I personally would like to see what areas we might comment on, and maybe we need to see kind of what the plan looks like, a little more detail, and maybe sketch out which parts. I kind of see it as us being public servants for the whole county. We're not just focused on the river or this use or that use. We're looking at, costs, et cetera. So maybe we'd have a follow-up work session, or maybe we'd work individually with department people and come up with something if there's, unanimous support for something.
I think it's a good
So
idea.
you guys can talk some more with Peter about it.
Great.
Yes.
I'm going to be gone till after lunch, so.
Okay.
So, and I may be going off to a meeting, so we haven't really coordinated this well today, because I
Oh.
had notified that I have a work source board meeting midday today.
What time?
So my proposal is to start at 1:30 today instead of 1, I think.
Oh, that would be excellent, because I had a call I wanted to be on, but I was going to give it up. So 1 o'clock, 1:30 would be good to reconvene.
So, yeah, if we just make that,
Sound-
That's good, yep.
good, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to do that. Sorry, I can't hear the presentation.
You can watch it on tape.
Yeah.
So, Peter, do you have enough direction then to,
I
If,
support some comments.
Okay.
Letter, I'm envisioning a letter. I'm not sure exactly what's in it yet.
I sent the board, I didn't put it in the memo, but in an email I sent to the board through county administration, the at these two open houses last week, I went to the one in Bend, there was also one in Prineville. They had a bulleted list of how to provide comments. And if I'll offer a suggestion. What I could do is revisit those kind of, that framework, so to speak, and maybe prepare a draft, I'll call it a letter, that underscores some of the comments that I've made today. It would just be a starting point that speaks to kind of the regional implications, the sensitivity of the economic effects of this proposal. Obviously, the what's proposed does still have effects on Jefferson County. So one of the questions, I think for the board is, I would propose drafting a letter for public testimony that the board can consider that is really honed in on the draft habitat conservation plan. That's what the applicants proposed. That was in coordination with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then underscore some of the emphases on, just the sensitivity of the of the economic impacts that the HCP already potentially will contribute, or not contribute, but to underscore the sensitivity of the habitat conservation plan, how it impacts agricultural lands and the economics, and then certainly in relationship to more of the conservation measures. Did that make sense? Again, weighting it more to the HCP, but underscoring that there is still sensitivities that it will have specifically in Jefferson County.
Well, and we can digest that,
Yeah.
You're saying focus on the words on the page as provided for the habitat conservation plan, and then comments, because there'll be all kinds of comments and opinions around that.
Yeah, I guess more succinctly, sorry for maybe getting lost a little bit. One of the questions that you don't have to decide today is, are you supportive of the draft habitat conservation plan as proposed by the applicants?
So a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of.
That's the way please.
And I guess, and importantly, as opposed to the no alternative or the alternative 3 or 4 scenarios that are there.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you for saying it succinctly, because
Well,
it wasn't.
Well, I
Now
appreciate Tom
Yeah.
also providing
Yeah.
those parameters, because there's 3 other alternatives, and it will give the board the ability to consider then further emphasizing those topics, those issues that are still really sensitive that we've kind of touched on today. So I'll work with administration and prepare something for the first full week in November, if that sounds good.
Is there any concept of getting to that 400, 500, or 600 CFS that were kind of the, I mean, those numbers are getting to be a lot bigger. And my understanding is this river system flowed maybe at 800 CFS naturally before there was any Wickiup Reservoir, Green Prairie, Crescent.
I think it had, a good question, good statement, Commissioner. I mean, I think it acted similarly to the Metolius. When you go to the Metolius, you look at its hydrograph, it is flat.
Yeah.
Obviously a bigger watershed. So
But at 800, I think, even.
yeah, this is not replicating natural flows. I think we need to be, this is still going to be a managed system. You're talking about a lot of water that's going to be provided during the winter season and less water during the irrigation season. But the other thing, just to underscore, is alternative 4, which is the most tilted towards conservation. That would be a 20-year
right, it's up to
lifespan.
600 at 20 years.
Yeah, and so it's a 20-year plan as opposed to a proposed 30-year plan. The other thing, the other element that's worth underscoring is I know that there's been conversations, and I think it may likely occur, is having the applicants contribute a certain amount of money annually to a restoration fund that deals with habitat improvements and is then leveraged with other partners. I think it would, as I understand it, would be overseen by a third party. So there's also a restoration element outside of water flows, but I think the takeaway is there really needs to be more water to help the frog, and that's trying to replicate more of a natural hydrograph.
Would that financial piece be in this habitat conservation plan? Or
I think it's being discussed right now, about $100,000. I mean, still a draft, so
That would
they.
be part of this plan, not like a side agreement.
Correct. It would be part of this plan, and it's been introduced, and I think there, as I understand it, there's still, I think the irrigation districts are open to that. It's still under discussion.
So what are they doing with the bullfrog then?
The bullfrog, as I understand, has not migrated over here or been introduced here. It is still a threat, and so that'll be something that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will have to monitor and presumably take measures to minimize. I gather once bullfrogs are, which I think are from Europe, like so many invasive species, once they hit an ecosystem, they are hard to eradicate. So to the extent that there are some here, there's going to have to be measures that try to trap them, that try to minimize their migration. Presumably, if we ever see colder winter conditions, that could help limit their population expansion. But I know they were very prevalent in the Willamette Valley when the Willamette Valley did have Oregon spotted frog.
I have a question. You know, Lake Billy Chinook, they were talking about a fish that was something that was being fished in Lake Billy Chinook. What is the predominant fish that they catch there? Do you remember the report we just read? Because I am not really
I think that was just in the newspaper also? Or?
No, it was in the reading for the policy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was in there, and it did mention, and I'm going to have to go back and read that, because I was kind of fascinated that was the trout they were capturing in Lake Billy. So I'm going to look that up, and I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting dynamics.
Yeah, and Oregon spotted frog, its habitat ends essentially at the old mill. So it has not, it's not migrating downstream, and I don't think, from what I gather, the likelihood of it doing so is really low, because the canyon starts getting really incised, and of course diversions happen in Bend, so the water fluctuations below Bend.
They stay in the water too, is my understanding.
Yeah, the spotted frogs are in the riparian area. They're not migrating upstream, on
They're not
private
going on
property.
grassy and dirt.
Correct. You're not going to find them in your lawn. They're going to be where there's.
They need to be where it's really, really moist.
It's in the wetlands. And so I don't know if you've been lately to Ryan Meadow. Have you guys been up to upstream of Dillon Falls? That was a project that I think the irrigation, as I understand it, Deschutes Basin Board of Control contributed to, as that meadow was historically flooded, or was an area where the Deschutes would maybe jump its banks a bit. But up until recently, it was separated from the river system, and historically, when upon settlement, it was used for grazing. But now they have, in fact, I just happened to be out there 2 weeks ago, and it was still pretty wet. So that is like prime, or spotted frog habitat, because I can tell you, you and I aren't walking out there. We're going to be on that kind of levee system if we wanted to go upstream to the slough or to Benham Falls. So that's where the spotted frogs are residing, and where there are wetlands on the Little Deschutes, in the Upper Deschutes, that's where they're going to reside. And we, again, Deschutes County has, for well over 30 years, had regulations that protect that area. So on paper, those have contributed to their critical habitat. Okay, thank you. That was a lot. Hopefully
Thank you,
that was
Peter.
helpful. Okay, thank you. I'll see you. I'll prepare something for the first week in November.
Okay, the first full week, you said, not next?
I don't think I can turn around something for next week, but I would shoot. Is that the week of the 6th, November 6th, I think?
Next week, we have that hearing already on Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, so it would be, try to get a week from, or excuse me, 2 weeks from today, or 2 weeks from this Monday. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd love to call up Hillary Marcino. Welcome.
Hillary Saraceno, Deschutes County Health Services, Deputy Director of Public Health.
And Heather Keisner with Deschutes County Health Services, one of the program managers. And I apologize for my attire. I just came from a flu clinic.
Gosh,
I mean, usually don't invest in jeans.
you could have orange on, and then I'd go like, oh, it's Halloween, right?
So we're here to talk to you about, state has received some additional funding for hepatitis A, and it is a one-time, short, limited duration funding that will last from 11/1 or thereabouts to June 30th, 2020. So we have a short little window of time. And it is really in a response to hepatitis A. There's an eruption of hepatitis A outbreaks happening across the country. We were very fortunate in that we had almost an outbreak here. We did have some individuals with hepatitis A in our homeless, or not homeless, but vulnerable population, and our unstably housed population. And therefore, the state, when they received this funding, we're looking around the state to see what areas maybe should be upping their response, and we were one of the areas that was identified as being able to receive the funding. So we are before you today to ask for permission, authority to accept that funding. It will be coming to you in Amendment 4 next week, along with the Program Element 51 funding that we've been talking about for public health modernization, in particular our regional communicable disease response, and then our local capacity building funding. So those will be in Amendment 3 and 4 next week. And I'm going to let Heather talk a little bit about Hep A and what that means.
Okay, so the funding we received, most counties around the state received this funding. It's just additional funding that the Center for Disease Control is sending out across the country to respond to the growing number of Hep A cases. And Hep A in the past, you probably think of it as kind of restaurant foodborne type illnesses, and we've done a really good job really eradicating, for the most part, a lot of our Hep A cases due to the effectiveness of the vaccine. However, with the growing rate of the opioid epidemic happening around the country, what's now happening is we're seeing elevated cases of Hep A in more kind of the 40 and older age group who haven't been vaccinated, and a lot of them in the homeless population as well as IV drug use population. And so the CDC is really wanting a concerted effort across the states and counties to do really go in and do targeted outreach and Hep A vaccine work within pockets of our area. So this funding is really for all of Central Oregon. So what we're looking at, because it's so short term and very fast paced, they want us to get out there into these communities and work with our nurses to get vaccine out there. So we're able to get some vaccine from the state, as well as I'm looking at just bringing on my intern from last spring, who already has been working a lot with these populations as a temp to come in for the next 5 months and really work with Central Oregon Veterans Outreach, the jail, a lot of the homeless shelters, to do some really targeted Hep A vaccine clinics. And then on top of that, we also want to provide other vaccines. We don't want to just focus on Hep A. That's the intent of the funding is for Hep A, but since we're in there, we also want to work on Tdap, flu, other vaccines to go in there. And then really working with our clinics and our EDs to make them aware of what's going on, so when they see a higher risk individual in their clinic or in their ED, that they're also offering Hep A vaccine.
So how long is that vaccination good for? Is that a 10-year or what?
It's good for forever. So it's a 2-dose series.
Yep, 2 dose.
Yeah, and the first dose is actually over 90% effective, but they also do recommend a second dose 6 months later. But even 1 dose is very effective.
Okay, so I noticed it's really an 8-month program because it goes through June 30th.
Goes through June 30th, yeah. So it depends on how long. So we got $40,000 to work
Right.
with. So
We can have it for what? Do you say 5 months?
Yeah, so it's going to be at least through May. And we're hoping really that this person will be able to really set the kind of the framework for being able to sustain this moving forward. So working with the jail for them to be able to provide Hep A in the future, and they're actually interested in that as far as flu, Tdap, and Hep A. So kind of working with them to set up systems, and same with the ED, and then really building those relationships so then when the funding runs out, we internally can continue those relationships and those partnerships and those vaccine clinics. So that's the intent.
So the other shot, the Tdap, okay, so I know tetanus is good for 10 years, isn't that?
Yes.
Okay, so what about, I know that you are not to get a whooping cough shot every year, because that's what my mother did, and she had a terrible reaction to it. So how long is that shot good for?
So right now, the Tdap is only recommended once,
Okay.
unless you're pregnant. It's recommended at every pregnancy.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. So why were they telling people then to get another whooping cough shot if they were around children? I mean, it was like they were advertising it on television.
At this point, it's really just that one time. That could change in the future, but for right now, it's really Tdap once, and then if you're pregnant, there are people. I mean, it's not going to hurt if you get it more than once, but the recommendation is once unless you're pregnant, and then every time.
Okay, great.
And
Well,
so,
this
yeah.
timing, right? If we can reach those vulnerable populations.
Yeah, and I think the other concern is not just the increase in cases, but the severity of the cases. A lot of the people who are getting Hep A are hospitalized, and so it's really taxing the system, and it's a high morbidity. So
It
that's
is.
all I have.
Okay.
So again, it's not a new grant. The funding will be coming through Program Element 43. So it will be and through that amendment.
Yeah. And you mentioned intern from last year. That'd be the contracted part-time outreach coordinator. Also here. So you already have somebody kind of in mind that's worked with us in the past also already.
She's very excited. She can. Yeah, she was a wonderful intern. She was an MPH student from LSU, and she's really excited about this work. So,
That's great.
and so it wouldn't be additional FTE. We're just going to bring on as a temp.
Okay. Wonderful. So
Yeah.
do we need a motion for that, or will that just come back on our consent?
Approval from commissioners to receive funding.
Yeah, I think in terms of the grant policy, it's approval to apply, even though the state is saying here's $40,000 that we would like to give to the county. So I think
So
it
when
would
you
be.
see it, the amendment next week, or whenever we're able to get it on your agenda, it can be on the consent agenda, because you've already basically.
Okay.
Well, I move approval of additional program element 43 funding from Oregon Health Authority's immunization program support of hepatitis A vaccinations.
And I'll second the motion. Any further comment, Commissioner DeBonne?
No?
Thank you.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare, yes.
There you go.
Vice Chair votes yes.
Congratulations.
So,
Thank you.
thank you very, very much. And Hillary, you're now on the agenda again. And
A little bit bigger.
Do we introduce again?
I have a card for you, and I should have flowers, but next time I'll get you flowers.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you.
Congratulations, yeah.
So
You want me to introduce myself? They
I'm not
already-
going to introduce myself
Yes,
again.
hi. Good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Dana Drum. I'm the Strategic Partnerships Lead for the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division, and I oversee the triennial review work. And my role is to kind of be primary liaison for the Public Health Division to local public health administrators across the state.
Well, welcome to Bend.
Thank you.
Sunny day.
It is gorgeous. It was a nice drive over.
Well, and congratulations. I mean, if, looking at the paperwork provided, very positive environment, positive review, no issues noted. So, yeah, let's go through it. Written document explaining the big picture here also, so.
So you stole my thunder.
Oh, no, I'm here to celebrate. I'm setting the pace.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I will just say and follow up to that I've been overseeing the triennial review since 2015, and I don't believe I've ever seen a review with no compliance findings. So I just want to acknowledge the work that goes into that, and the tone that gets set by leadership and then followed through by staff to do that. It's a lot of work. It's a thorough review, and so yeah, this is a first for me. I imagine at some point, but there maybe had been one with no compliance findings.
We
but-
came close, if you'll recall, 3 years ago. We came really close,
Focused, good job.
and this time we did it.
So in your materials, you have kind of a handout. I won't cover everything, but would like to do just kind of a brief overview on the roles and responsibilities related to local public health authority and you as the governing body, OHA's agreements related to public health, and then spend the bulk of our time talking a little bit about the triennial review results.
Well, and I was hoping the cameras were here for this item.
I know.
I know.
The-
We're going to have to send out a big press release
Well, and
on this
I
one.
support that also.
Yes, I mean, this is, and Dr. Conway, thank you for joining us at the desk, because it is really, I'm so impressed that, you didn't get it 3 years ago, but you came back even bigger, so.
And I have to definitely give gratitude to the staff, the supervisors, the managers, and the line staff who work hard every day and it is a rigorous process. It's a 1 month review, and you have state staff looking at everything you're doing, shadowing you at every location, doing chart reviews, looking at how you're storing medications. I mean, there's a large number of requirements that we have to meet to get this kind of feedback. So it tells me my staff are doing a great job.
Fabulous job.
All right. So you, as the Board of Commissioners, are the governing body of the local public health authority by law. And so that's why we are reporting to you on the results of the triennial review. And I like to always kind of just touch base on these responsibilities because I don't think that they necessarily in all jurisdictions get in front of you that often in terms of what your specific legal roles and responsibilities are. But, in terms of collaborating with the local public health administrator to assure that local public health policies and goals are set and met for the jurisdiction, adopting and enforcing any ordinances or rules that are required to administer public health functions, to protect public health and safety. Also reviewing and making recommendations related to public health modernization, which I know your public health leadership has been talking with you about over time, and lots of great work happening there. And then monitoring the progress of the local public health authority, and so this report to you is one of the ways that we do that. In terms of the local public health authority itself, some of the things that by law the LPHA is responsible for are things like issuing isolation and quarantine orders. So if you have someone with tuberculosis or another communicable disease, and most of the time we work with folks to voluntarily kind of comply and not be out in the community if they need to be more isolated for the duration of the disease or while they're contagious. Rarely, but sometimes it happens that folks are not cooperative, and so it is part of the role of the local public health authority to seek or issue administrative orders for quarantine and isolation if that's needed to protect the public. Related to that are receiving and investigating reportable diseases and outbreaks, and certainly the agenda item you just heard related to hepatitis A goes towards preventing that from being necessary. We're moving into school law time and the review of immunization orders to make sure kids have the vaccinations they need or a medical or non-medical exemption in place. And then licensure and follow-up on those licenses related to tourist accommodations, food facilities, those kinds of things. And then regulation of public water systems. And certainly a couple of summers ago, you were probably well aware of the happenings in Salem and Detroit Lake and the increase in cyanotoxins and the impact that can have on the drinking water system. So some other things are adopting and updating a public health modernization assessment, which in 2016 Deschutes County completed. We'll be starting to think about in the next couple of years doing an update of that assessment. Adopting and implementing a public health modernization plan. That's not due until 2023, but we're we'll be starting this biennium to think about what that looks like. And then, overseeing any other public health programs that are needed to protect health and safety. And I know that there are several places where you, as a board, have invested, where you've seen specific community needs that are outside of funding that we're able to provide. But things like your marijuana prevention specialist in Sisters in La Pine is one example. And then, of course, coordination with coordinated care organizations and early learning hubs, which I know in this community there's a long history of that collaboration and working together. So there are two primary agreements between OHA and Deschutes County for public health, and those are covered under the triennial review. The first is the Intergovernmental Agreement for Public Health Services. That's the way we get funding to the county from OHA. And you see, I'm sure, more amendments than you care to for that agreement.
It's been amendment season recently.
It feels like it's always amendment season. We continue to look at that, and I know the county administrators group at AOC has had some conversation around that as well.
And that IGA, if you'll recall, is pretty fat in your packets. It's a lot.
So, except for county councils, I'm probably one of the few people that's read it cover to cover. So it's a good bedtime reading. And then the Environmental Health Intergovernmental Agreement, which is that agreement works a little bit differently. You collect fees, and a portion of that gets remitted to the state, and that's because that's how that has been set up in statute and has a long history of that. But we do review that program as part of the triennial review. So the triennial review is based on those agreements. It's to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations and any other funding requirements related to the intergovernmental agreements. Most of our funding comes from the federal government, and as Congress appropriates funds, they appropriate it for very specific things, and then attached to those appropriations are some specific requirements, and we have to assure that those are met. We noted in the letter, the original letter you received, that there were 16 different areas reviewed. Actually, there were 18, so we're correcting that. Yeah. My apologies for that. We were on site for the review this spring, and we really treat the review as, I know it feels probably like an audit to our local colleagues. Our approach is to it's really about identifying strengths and areas for improvement and how we can work together. The state and local partnership for public health is really critical. We can't assure public health and safety without our local partners being collaborative and partners in the work. And so it's to everyone's benefit that we work to help everyone succeed. And so that's how we try to approach the review.
And I think the other thing that's benefited us in our particular county is we have a pretty low turnover. So a lot of the same staff are here every 3 years, and so we have learned, but we've retained those staff, so we've been able to continue improving, and now we've reached the gold star.
The gold medal.
The gold medal. Oh, there you go. Better.
So we obviously identified a number of strengths. I think key areas around leadership of Dr. Conway, Ms. Saraceno, and Dr. Fawcett, the health officer, as well as your leadership and continued investment in things like reproductive health and communicable disease, as well as some other areas. Almost all of public health work takes time, and so we know it takes time to see the benefits of those investments. And so, thank you for sticking with it and making sure that there's plenty of access to public health services in the jurisdiction. There's also been a lot of leadership around focus on workforce development, cross-jurisdictional sharing within Central Oregon, and then also some being able, as as Jefferson, Crook, and Deschutes County have worked together, there's also been increased capacity to improve the relationships with the tribes of, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, which I think is just more and more important every day. So some of the program area strengths, certainly in Babies First, that is a nurse home visiting program, as well as the Nurse Family Partnership. And that work has, Nurse Family Partnership has helped seen over 400 families since that work started in 2011 throughout the Tri-County area. There's a commitment to a trauma-informed approach to the work, which in some of our most vulnerable populations and communities, that's really essential to gaining trust and being able to meet the needs of people where they are. There's also been a lot of collaboration around the perinatal care continuum. So I think the maternal and child health work that you are doing is really excellent. Communicable disease is another big area and a place where you have also invested. I think as Deschutes County's population grows, this body of work kind of exponentially grows. So between January 2016 and December 2018, your jurisdiction had 5% of the overall cases, CD cases, and 4% of the state total of outbreaks. So when that happened, you have increased work and volume, and as the population grows, it's not necessarily a proportional growth in terms of the volume of work. It's actually can be much more than that. You've seen that with the measles outbreak, and then also increased syphilis cases, which is something we're seeing around the state, and I think sometimes surprises folks. But all of that requires increased follow-up and tracking, and your team is very responsive at that. Also with TB, Heather Keisner was sharing with me the other day that, we went a while with no TB cases and then recently had, 4. And TB is a very labor-intensive disease in terms of follow-up with clients, and takes a lot of time. When you have a TB case, it can take a staff person offline for a period of time to focus on all of the work related to that. There's daily observed therapy that's required. Often there are other needs to help create some stability for those clients so they are able to continue their daily treatment and screening follow-up and those kinds of things. And then also kind of related, your HIV care and treatment program is an excellent program. There's high compliance in terms of the currently enrolled clients, as well as compliance in terms of chart review, policies and protocols, working towards good outcomes. The reason this work is so important is that it helps keep people of our HIV positive individuals virally suppressed. When the virus is suppressed, then we do not have to be as concerned much at all about transmission of the disease. So, but often, again, like with TB, it takes a number of supports to make sure that that viral suppression and access to medications and care continues to maintain that. In terms of immunizations, you also are doing a lot of work around collaboration, working with CCOs, providers throughout in the Tri-County area, and that goes hand in hand with preventing communicable disease. So, in terms of emergency preparedness, you have an exemplary program, lots of good collaboration, really exceeding the minimum program requirements on a regular basis, and a model for the rest of the state. A lot of work collaborative work in a variety of areas that have the potential to turn into emergencies, and so making sure you're prepared for those.
Great partnerships.
Yeah.
On the smoke management plan, Oregon OHA and Department of Forestry,
Yes.
kind of the, I guess DEQ is the other one. The big picture about prescribed burns, having a few days of controlled smoke in Central Oregon, opposed to a week or two of uncontrolled wildfire smoke when we can do this work. So yeah, and having that outreach plan, which we have now, using the media and the best practices. So
Yes.
We're strong supporters of that. Getting those
Great.
prescribed burdens on the ground is very important.
Great. I think we've seen a draft of the plan from ODF, but I don't believe it's been officially submitted. We expect it any time now, and then we'll get our comments back to ODF around that, and then they'll.
So yeah, we just put in kind of the final version of a plan that's
Yeah.
proposed by
Great.
Shoots.
Great. In terms of other services, local investment in reproductive health services, you continue to be a provider of reproductive health services and assuring access to those in the community. But also, there's work happening to strengthen partnerships with providers and other providers in the community that will also strengthen that access. Closely related to all of these things are sexually transmitted diseases, and I mentioned the rise of syphilis. You have had one congenital syphilis case, and we're starting to see some of these pop up. And now we actually have additional funding available if there is a congenital case that we can provide some support for as well. So that will happen in the future if that were to occur. Tobacco prevention and education, again, a lot of collaboration. There's work continuing to move tobacco retail licensing forward, and I know a number of cities in the jurisdiction have expressed some support around that in conversations. And then certainly your response to vaping injuries and death and work related to that. And then there's been a large effort to increase the referrals of physicians to the Quit Line. And I think this was a Central Oregon effort that resulted in some really significant improvements and increases in the number of physician referrals. The data tell us that if a physician asks about tobacco use and then makes a referral to evidence-based cessation program, that folks are more likely to make a quit attempt. And we know that it probably takes 7 to 8 quit attempts before it sticks. And so the more that can be happening in the provider's office, the better in terms of successful quit attempts. So with that, I'll just stop and see if there are any questions about the triennial review. I didn't talk a lot about environmental health, but you have an exemplary program. All those programs were in compliance in terms of inspection rates. Lots of kudos from our staff to Jeff Freund, who does the drinking water regulation work. There are 169 water systems that you have responsibility for, and his work, he's very collaborative and communicative with us when there are issues that arise. So I'll stop there and see what questions you have about the review.
So you were here how many weeks in with the group?
It's been about a month.
Yeah.
Was it a month?
Yeah.
It was tail end of 1 month and then well into the next month, so
Okay, so it was
it was at least 4 weeks.
4 weeks in. So
And
that's,
different state staff came
okay,
to do different parts of it.
okay, so that's really good then. So people came with their expertise and,
Right.
yeah,
There's interviews involved, and then there's a exit interview in terms of that's where they share some of the things that they've observed, but then we don't get the official report until it's sent to the commissioners.
okay.
So I think it's worth noting that there were a lot of people pulling on various oars. So it's great to have the support of OHA ongoing and very active ascertainment in this, and then very large percentage of public health people with Hillary's leadership have organized. It may surprise you that this actually involves some forms and papers.
Yes, that too.
Paperwork.
And I'd like to add, I believe the first or second week, we were evacuated from Courtney.
Of course you
In the
were.
Oh,
middle
that's
of that,
right.
We
That's
had to
right.
get creative.
Yes.
I think we rescheduled one, but
Hillary, do you know the average length that your section has been with the county then? Because you said that's one of the reasons why you really know your job and you're doing, and you love what you're doing. Do you happen to know that?
you know what our turnover, our
Yeah,
retention rate, I know it's much lower than behavioral health. I don't know it off the top of my head, I just know it.
No, I know like the average is 8 years for all 1,000
It
employees.
depends on which program area, like WIC probably has the most, the longest, employees that have been there the longest.
Right.
That have stayed. Other areas might have a little more turnover, but it's still very, very stable.
Right.
And then what we're experiencing right now is some nurses are being, we've lost a couple of nurses recently because they've gone to other jobs that pay a little bit better. So that's something we're watching carefully. So that's one area that just this last couple of months we lost.
How many did we lose?
We lost 3.
Lost 3, okay.
So it's just something.
That's a common issue around the state for public health nurses, when their pay scales tend to be when they work in public health is significantly lower than if they were to go to the hospital, and that continues to be a barrier to hiring.
I did
had
talk
that
to
in
a
a
nurse once who worked at St. Charles, but I think our county benefits are so good in comparison, if you can, do that. And when in your analysis before you leave.
And in the past, it was St. Charles, and that was long ago, and we've had a very long, stable period, so we were a little alarmed by, these nurses are specifically, I think a couple of them are going to Pacific Source.
Okay, all right. We'll have to watch that.
Yeah, just something to be aware of.
I know, well, it's amazing, and we will have to do a big press release on this, because thank you, Dana, for all those, true and kind words about how hard our department works. And, I just saw it in the measles outbreak, how, I don't think Heather was, I think she probably didn't sleep for a week or two, right, Heather? She was, calling people and checking and, and she was on TV like every day. So she was extremely busy trying to stay ahead of it. And it was incredibly impactful to Clark County and Washington State. The cost there, we didn't want to duplicate that. What did it cost us, like $20,000 or something for just that emergency that really that was kind of in and out of the county? Tom, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'd love to add to it. Congratulations to everybody in public health. The commitment to the excellence just permeates the organization, as we saw from the kind of soup to nuts review of everything there. And often, certainly highly visible incidents like the measles outbreak or public water systems issues, certain folks in public health come before you and, and face the public and reassure them that they're on the job. But this is really top to bottom. Every individual in public health can and should celebrate, just the excellence throughout the organization, and everybody contributes in different ways to the overall objective of having a healthy community, and so therefore everybody should take part and take credit for this wonderful review on certainly in recent times unprecedented review statewide. So thanks and congratulations to everyone.
And thank you for acknowledging that it is, all layers have to do their part. If one layer doesn't, it would show. It didn't. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, and your leadership. And I'm really sorry that you are going to retire. Maybe you would think about staying 4 more years. Yes, no, you are an amazing leader. You're a positive person, and you can just see it.
It's been my pleasure and honor. I really feel very fortunate to have been able to do what I've done with the county all these years.
Wow.
Many sports careers ending strong is regarded as a very positive.
There you go.
Oh, that's
We
true.
framed it that way.
You're going to be the Roger Federer of Deschutes County.
We got the training review, we got public health accreditation, and we're all good.
Well, so, very positive, results, building on the results from 3 years ago, obviously. Leadership and the continuity in the organization. As I say, and you've heard me say during our budget cycles, if there's anything you can count on is a very dynamic world in health, so public health and behavioral health. But you have this one, kind of dialed in right now. Congratulations to the leadership, the documentation of, as I say, the finances are where we really get to see each other every year, but also just each program and getting out there on the ground and providing these services and then being able to document it at the state level for a review. So congratulations, very exciting. And I do support, yeah, a press release or something we can get out there, celebrating this.
We'll work with,
What?
we'll work with Whitney.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We'll work with Whitney and get something amazingly.
So
Yes.
then the next step is probably to change everything around, so then if 3 years from now, we're wondering which end is up. So that's the
well-
way these health things work, and we expect it, so.
Well, I hope not. I think in terms of looking towards the future, the partnership and work that's happening in Jefferson, Crook,
Yeah.
and Deschutes really sets you up, I think, well, and really forward thinking in terms of prevention and working together with your providers around issues of communicable disease and other things as hopefully more funding comes. So, I'm confident that Deschutes will continue to do really great work.
I'm
Well,
sure they will.
I had the privilege of attending their retreat yesterday morning for a couple hours, and I know they're going to accomplish more amazing things in the next 12 months.
Our Public Health Advisory Board is doing good stuff.
Things that they actually realize it's in their lane and where they can make a difference, and that's so important to make something significant, and it is a challenge because when you see I think it's still their first priority, right? The immunizations. The state was pretty wide in 2000 as far as immunization goes, and now we have like blue pockets. So, we really need to focus on them as public health people.
Priority.
So, anyway, great. Well,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, Tom. Are you all leaving now? Pam?
Yeah.
I was here to hear that part.
Yes,
Here you go, with coffee.
Texted Morgan to talk to Whitney.
Oh, good.
perfect. Thank you very much. I know, I was thinking Sharon probably already sent her an email 20 minutes ago, like, Whitney, get down here. Molly?
Okay. Hello.
For the record, I'm Molly Wells-Darling, the Program Manager for Intensive Adult Services, and I am here to talk with you about the Telecare contract, hoping that we can get approval to move forward.
Yes.
So this contract is for services provided through Telecare in our secure residential treatment facility, which houses 16 clients, and then 2 residential treatment homes, where they have 5 clients apiece. The contract is through Service Element 28 and 30 through the state. The money that is coming to us is actually passed through to Telecare. So previously in this contract, if you had seen the previous contract, there were 2 different elements to the contract. We had Service Element, or we had Part A funding and Part C funding. The contract is different this year in that Part A funding is now going directly from the state to Telecare. So Telecare will be invoicing the state will pay them. The Part C funding will go through us, and how that works is the Telecare system invoices us. We then invoice the state pays us, and then we pay Telecare. And this is for indigent clients. So anybody who doesn't meet the qualifications for Medicaid, or who has lost Medicaid if they were in the jail system or in the hospital system and need to reapply. So they will come out into our facilities that Telecare runs, and then we will assist them in applying for Medicaid. But in the meantime, we will pay for that room and board for them. And I guess do I need to detail what these facilities do?
So just acknowledging that these are existing facilities, same number of beds. This is the follow-on from the state for the program elements from the legislative, kind of funding. And it was good that you explained the difference between the 2 parts. So now we're only doing one of those from last biennium, basically.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to do the basic introduction of what's going on there, that'd be good for us too.
So our secure residential treatment facility, that is our locked facility. It's called the Deschutes Recovery Center. And it provides services to 16 patients. And these are for people who have either gone to the state hospital under civil commitment or under the Psychiatric Security Review Board and then are released back into our community, and this is a step down for them, for us to be able to provide support for them before they transition back into the community. It also serves the purpose of diverting clients from the state hospital. So we may have someone who is decompensating in the community, or perhaps they're in our acute care facility, and we try to get them into our one of our telecare homes prior to going to the state hospital, because research shows that actually mandating someone to treatment in a state hospital, clients are less likely to follow through afterwards.
Is that kind of a Deschutes County facility or Eastern Oregon facility? I'm just thinking the mix of folks, which is good for both. I was just kind of wondering.
It actually serves the state.
Okay, the state even, okay.
State. So we have the bulk of the people in there under civil commitment are from the Deschutes County, or at least this region, but we do have people from all over the state because we are a statewide resource. And then Psychiatric Security Review Board is also throughout the state.
Yep, got it, okay. So yeah, it's the most appropriate person at the right time.
Exactly,
Got it.
exactly. And then our 2 residential treatment homes are not locked facilities. They are 2 homes in the community that have 24-hour staff where the clients can live and receive services through that home and also through our county mental health services.
Great. I just have an insurance question. I don't know, it's on packet page 78, so that's not probably going to help you at all. But according to our insurance requirement, it says we require $2 million of professional liability per occurrence limit.
Exhibit 2.
Yes. Okay. And the certificate, let's see. It's showing that per single claim, it says like 2 million and then 5 million. And yet when you go back to the certificate from, it's like, I believe it's the only certificate in the packet for telecare, it shows 1 million and 3 million general aggregate. And I'm or at the top one for general liability.
That commercial, Commissioner, is supplemented with the umbrella, which is a $5 million policy.
Okay.
So that puts us well above the limits.
Underneath the umbrella then?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I was worried about. I was just like, you know, we've had, people have had certificate of insurance now that have not, they've been fraudulent. Yes, so I've learned that you really have to look at these and you actually need to call because, you know, it's happened in Deschutes County where people are submitting fraudulent. Yeah, I know. Who would have thought, right? I mean, it comes through on the facts and you think it's fine, but it's not always fine. So, okay, so that makes the difference then.
Great. Well, with that, I'll move board signature of document number 2019-459.
I'll second that, but Tom would like to make.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank Molly. Within the last year, there were some points brought up by our sheriff in terms of the operation of the Deschutes Recovery Center, and under Molly's leadership, quite a number of changes were made there to make the facility more secure, and work better for both the patients and the staff. And I know the sheriff was very pleased to see some of those changes, and that some may be incorporated into this new contract as well. But I just wanted to acknowledge your work in making that happen.
Thank you, and thank you for your support with that.
Molly, when did you start? I know it was just recently.
July 1st, I think?
Yes. So I know. Thank you so much for being here. And I was just curious, the company that does the work is actually a California company?
They have facilities throughout all of the United States.
Okay, they're a national company then, headquartered in California then.
They have a regional director that's locally here that we work with very closely, and they're a fabulous partner. They're very responsive.
Okay, good. That's great to hear then. Wonderful. So any other comments?
No.
Okay. Commissioner DeBoer?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare, Vice Chair, yes. So thank you. And that is for approval of your agreement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're running a little bit early, and man, you timed it right. Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hello. Good morning, Commissioners and County Administration. My name is Sarah Peterson, and I'm a Management Analyst with Public Health. And I'm here to request board approval and signature of a 1-year contract with Saving Grace to operate Mary's Place and the Courthouse Advocacy Project. The work plan and budget are attached to the agenda request. So I'm here to answer any questions or provide additional information.
I did have a question. Dave, my packet doesn't show an insurance rider. Is there one in yours?
There was an insurance requirement, yeah, 3 million, 5 million.
Right.
As far as whether the certificate is here or not, those
I-
typically go to risk. I can't say that I recall seeing it, but if it's not in the packet, I know risk won't sign off until they've seen it. So,
Okay.
I know that they did submit it.
Okay, it just didn't get in our packet.
yeah, I don't recall seeing it either, to be honest with you, but I do know those go to risk, and this contract won't proceed until risk is signed off as well as legal.
Okay, it's like a 3 million and a 5 million aggregate, so.
And we have had prior contracts with
Okay.
this organization, and we've never had insurance issues, so I'm pretty confident.
Oh, good. Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't there, so I was,
Yeah, no, that was a good catch, it isn't there.
so I'm just, I'm very into insurance this week, right? We have to be very careful. Sarah, did you have any questions?
Yeah, so what's the big picture for this funding from the feds? I know we do have the attachment award continuation sheet, Office of Violence Against Women, and I didn't get, so, yeah, this year and next year, I guess,
Okay.
is my thought, the big picture of.
Right, so since 2003, the county has received an Office on Violence Against Women grant. There was one year lapse, but in general, we've received it since 2003. And the current award will expire on October 1st, 2020. So we'll be looking at reapplying early this year. So this contract is 1 year of the Office on Violence Against Women grant, and then it's also 1 year of court filing fees, because in 2008, the Family Law Advisory Council designated a portion of the mediation fees to also fund Mary's Place. So so this contract is a combination of two funding streams, the OVW grant and the filing fees.
So I did have the privilege of meeting with Cassie McQueen. And, she's very passionate about her program, and, it's something I want to put on my calendar in order to visit the program. But, it sounds like you do make the program makes an enormous difference for people in vulnerable situations.
It really does. The contract, the deliverables are like a minimum of 1,200 supervised visits and exchanges per year to a minimum of 40 families. And those families are referred to the program via a court order or through a restraining order. So the purpose of the program really is to provide safety for adult survivors and children, and to hold batterers accountable. And since it's opened its doors, it's done that. There hasn't been any violence that has occurred at the center. So it is a really vulnerable population.
It happens to be that when you look at the people on parole in Deschutes County, domestic violence is one of the top two. It's up to like 250 a month they are tracking. So, it's an amazing that it is so high. And what has happened to our family?
I agree. Well, national data is that, 1 in 4 women is a survivor of domestic violence. So when we submitted the last grant application, the public health epidemiologist estimated that there's around 4,000 women who are survivors a year. Now, it's grossly underreported.
Right.
So we don't see them at the program. And Mary's Place does serve, obviously, it's families with children.
Right. I know. It's just shocking when you look at it, though, from a numbers point of view.
It is. And I know that Mary's Place staff would welcome you to visit. They offer The visits and exchanges actually occur on the evenings or weekends.
Right.
Because they use Munchkin Manor as a visitation space. And really during business hours, they're just doing intakes. So, I mean, if the time to come would be, around 6-ish during their hours of operation. You'd see the families coming and going, and it's really powerful to be there.
It's like going to the Family Drug Court graduation ceremony, when you see the families still together. And, sometimes that might take a little longer than you would be ideal, and yet the end result is that they have graduated.
Yeah.
So,
And we want the end result of this program to keep the survivors and adult survivors and children safe.
safe,
Yep.
right. So, amazing.
I know the court system really utilizes this, and we got the full court press as commissioners a couple years ago. So just so you know, I mean, the court system and, health department, a bunch of folks lined up and made sure we keep this program, we understand what's going on in this program and how valuable it is. So it's great that we have these federal dollars that we do qualify for that we can allocate there. So thank you for joining us today and, keeping track of the program. At this point, yeah, thank you. At this point, I'll move board signature of document number 2019-724, Saving Grace Imagined Life Without Violent Services contract.
And I'll second it. Any further discussion from anyone?
I'll make sure that Risk links up the insurance certificate, and I'm confident it exists and it's appropriate, but we'll make sure of that.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Adair? Yes. So, thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today, Sarah. Perfect timing.
My pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Okay. Do you have any other comments at the moment?
Nope.
Apparently, we need to take a recess until 1:30.
Yeah, so I'm
For-
glad I was able to mention it, because I just got a board meeting for another group in
Okay.
about that time.
All right, so, thank you very much.
Upstairs.
Upstairs, yes, the meeting will be upstairs.
Thank you.
Great.